It was a disappointing night, of course, for the losers of the UFC 238 championship fights on Saturday in Chicago. Marlon Moraes falls short of his UFC title dream against Henry Cejudo in the main event, suffers a third-round TKO defeat. He was doing well in the early going of the fight, but it just did not go his way on this night. Cejudo was able to get the better of him, and Moraes now has to go back to the drawing board. Came into this fight a winner of 18 of his past 19, had avenged that only defeat, and he just seemed like he was red hot. Potentially this was his time, but the fight didn't go his way. It seemed like for the most part his cardio failed him in the octagon on that night, and he now has to figure out what is next for him. We know Moraes is among the most dangerous fighters in that division, and it's not going to change. He is still rather young at just 30 years old, has a lot of time to grow still, get better, pick up some more big wins, and potentially get back to this title shot opportunity in the future. He's of course the number one ranked contender. He's a guy that is going to be in for big fights coming off of this one. And I think a matchup that makes a lot of sense is against his fellow Brazilian Pedro Munhoz, who lost as well on the UFC 238 card. Munhoz lost to Aljamain Sterling, who was potentially a title eliminator. Now I think it makes a lot of sense to match those two guys up against one another going forward, potentially do that fight as a main or co-main event on an upcoming card in Brazil. High stakes there, and the winner would be right back in the mix of the title shot conversation where they were coming into this event. So I think that's a fight that makes a lot of sense going forward at bantamweight, which was rapidly becoming one of the most stacked divisions and most exciting and compelling divisions in the UFC. And then of course in the women's flyweight division, we see Valentina Shevchenko defeat Jessica Eye with a brutal, scary head kick knockout. Eye came into this fight as a massive underdog. She was believing that she was going to have a big chance to play spoiler, get the upset in this fight, but it was just all for naught. She was completely outclassed from start to finish and suffers a very scary knockout via head kick. And now I think, of course, some time off is what is required for her. She needs to take an extended layoff after a brutal knockout like that and go back and just focus on her health first before anything. But when she is ready to go, I think some interesting matchups for her. She is still highly ranked at 125 pounds, and she's going to be in title eliminators, title contender type of matchups going forward until she loses a few in a row, if that happens, and kind of falls out of that division. But I think there's some interesting storylines you could do, and the one that makes me most interested is having a matchup between Eye and Valentina Shevchenko's sister, Antonia Shevchenko. That would be a very, very interesting fight coming off of this. Shevchenko suffering a loss recently of her own to Roxanne Modafferi, and she's looking to bounce back. So you have two fighters coming off losses. The sister fighting Jessica Eye in back-to-back fights would be a very compelling narrative going into a rebound matchup here. Whether or not the timelines work out for them to do that fight next remains to be seen, but I think that's a fight that could be done at any point down the line here with Eye coming off this knockout loss. It remains to be seen how much time she takes off and how much the division changes, but right now, if I can make my pick, I think that would be the most interesting fight for Jessica Eye coming off this knockout loss at UFC 238.